Warning, the Renegade Recruiter is not for the soft, timid, or faint-hearted. If you need permission or seek approval from your mother, spouse, mates in the pub, or anyone else for that matter, this really isn't for you. If any of what you've heard puts you off in the slightest, I advise you not to listen any further. You've been warned. Prepare yourself for the no bullshit, zero fluff. Quick, dirty, and uncensored secrets for any serious recruitment, staffing, and search business owner who wants to earn more money with less work and fewer headaches, without having to kiss ass or bend over backwards to please anyone. He's a relentless and fearless renegade who will stop at nothing to reveal the harsh, unforgiving, and brutal truth about what it really takes to succeed in this business. He's a guy people love to hate and hate to love. It's your host, Terry Edwards. The Renegade Recruiter is unleashed.
Hello. This is Terry Edwards, Renegade Recruiter, and welcome to another episode of Renegade Recruiter Unleashed. And of course, we're joined by our co-host, Drew. How are you, Drew?
I'm good, thank you, Terry. How are you?
I'm really good. Well, actually, I've got a confession to make. I had my wisdom tooth out yesterday, so I'm a bit of a pain, but I'm going to be a martyr and just soldier on as if nothing's happened, because I'm like that. But I look like a hamster at the moment. But look, enough about that. A bit special today. Our podcast today, we've got one of our clients, in fact. His name is Andy Naylor. Andy, thank you so much for joining us.
Pleasure.
Excellent. And I'm going to be honest here, Andy. The reason that I wanted you to kind of join us on the podcast. Andy's one of our elite clients, and just for those that don't know, with our elite clients, we meet them every 12 weeks down in London in a hotel for a couple of days and really look at their business very closely. But Andy and I live in the same town, so Andy's also been my chauffeur as well for a couple of stations. And I've actually come back from London with Andy in his car. And he's got a very nice car, by the way, because my neighbours think that Andy's my chauffeur now, because when he pulls up outside my drive, and he's just in his very posh car. But seriously, Andy, some of the stuff you just shared with me, I just thought it'd be great, just to share this with other owners and directors of recruitment businesses. So, for those that don't know anything about you, most of them don't, Andy, just give us an overview of who you are and what you do, please, mate.
Well, I run a business called Connect, which started out as a finance recruitment business. My background prior to that was 17 years in corporate recruitment businesses, 3 of them. So I started out in sales for 3 years, and then 7-year stints with finance recruitment groups, doing a variety of things, managing large teams over multiple locations, introducing permanent recruitment across 18 offices nationally, and all sorts of other things besides. And I got to a point in 2010, having just come through the trauma of 2008. And everything that brought, where I was at a pivotal point and decided I wanted to do something different. That was either going to be, ironically, something similar, but with probably a medium-sized recruitment business as an employee, or go and do something dramatically different, which I decided to do. And Connect was launched towards the end of 2010.
2010, excellent. And you say you started off in finance. What your business now? What type of recruitment do you do now, Andy?
Well, still we're driven by senior finance in the main, but over the last 3+ years, we've started to diversify in terms of functions. So we now operate across procurement, across senior sales and marketing roles globally, and we also have now started to fill senior general management roles, so chief operating officer, regional CEO, and even working in the R&D space internationally now as well. So it's branched out quite significantly from a functional point of view.
Fantastic, you really are, and on a global basis as well, you say, Andy. So what sort of countries have you worked in?
Well, a number. So obviously we started locally and across the UK. then we really followed the client relationships that we had, and mirrored where their business existed around the world. So we worked across Europe, France, Germany, Spain, the Netherlands, and more besides. We do quite a bit in North America now, and we've just started to work in Russia and Africa. So it's really has branched out.
Yeah, very much so. Very much so. Excellent. So I want to just double check because Drew's very quiet. Drew, can you hear us okay, mate?
Yeah, sorry, I can hear you fine. I was just
okay.
Sort of listening rather than giving input. And Andy, just wanted to check. I mean, you said that back in 2010 you was at a point where you wanted to do something different. What was it that sort of swayed you to starting your own business rather than going and being an employee again?
Well, I'd spent 17 years, my entire career with medium to large recruitment groups, and I think 2008 had quite an impact, that downturn, because it led to some downsizing in the business that I was part of, and many others. It also led to changes in the skill role as well as many other people's, and it just started me thinking. I think I'd lost my motivation within that particular business, and felt like I needed to do something which was more akin to the excitement and challenge that I was lucky enough to have earlier on in my career, and that really was linked to small to medium sized, fast growing businesses looking to break new ground, and I think I probably hung around in the last company I worked for longer than I really should have done, but that actually gave me a bit of time to take a breath and to consider my options. And really, when I started thinking about the kind of things that working in my own business would give me, I started thinking about things like the risk, the excitement, starting on a small scale, but being able to see the real impact of everything that you achieve. It just felt right. I mean, I did a lot of planning as well, but the gut feel was there as well. And I think it's, in life, it's always a combination of those two things, the planning and the feel for things. Maybe it was a midlife crisis as well. I was 40 at the time. So maybe I just felt as though I really wanted to do something that made me a little bit more vulnerable, almost a bit more exposed in a bit of a test, really, of all the skills that I'd accumulated in the previous years.
And as you embarked on that journey, Andy, what were your kind of expectations?
Well, so 6 years ago, my expectations were simple. I think simple and short term, I would say. Of course, in the back of my head, I had this plan and this dream of running a well-established, highly profitable, highly attractive business. But on day one, when you walk into a new setup, and you'll know this, you walk in with an empty database, a company name that nobody's heard of, no one to pay you a salary at the end of the month. The combination of all of those things meant that my expectation was to survive year one. It really was. Yeah. And it really was as simple and as short. I also wanted some planning that I'd done before launching the business. I wanted to the business to be as specialist as possible. I did know that at day one, and that still remains the case today. I wanted the business to be driven by developing new business relationships, not just relying on existing ones, and to focus specifically on profitability rather than just building scale.
Excellent.
And I think probably the final thing around expectations is I wanted everyone to enjoy the challenges that come with building a business from nothing, and to embrace the risk rather than be intimidated by it. So
awesome. Brilliant.
Yeah.
Andy, if I could sort of take you back now to that first year that you had in business. Now, obviously, you've got sort of 6-7 years experience. If you go back to sort of you in your first year in business, what advice would you give to yourself back then? So sort of what information would you give that you wish you knew sooner, or you wish you'd done things differently?
Well, I think that even though there were tweaks we could have made for things to have been perfect, I'm actually quite glad that we made certain mistakes and went off in different directions. So I don't know that I would change things all that dramatically, because a lot of the knowledge that we have now, 6 years down the line, is on the basis of having made some mistakes early on. So I would almost certainly, I mean, the experience has been really positive, so I would almost certainly do very similar things again. I would make sure that I mean, we did do a lot of planning, so I don't think I would change that. I don't know that I would change much. I quite like, and I've got doing that, and I think that's where a lot of the learning comes from.
Yeah, fair enough. But I have to say, Drew, I thought it was a great question, and it's not so much changing anything, Andy. It's just, what advice would you give the Andy, knowing what you know now? What advice would you give the Andy when you first set up your business?
Well, I would advise myself and anyone to spend time to think through the implications of setting up, and actually to write those things down. Because my experience was that the risks, once you write them on paper, are rarely as great as the reality. And writing them down helps to weigh up things when setting up a business can sometimes feel almost overwhelming. Because it can be such a dramatic change from the life that you already knew, and that you're used to. I think a detailed plan of how you want things to look, lots of detail to bring it to life, but also one which is not looking to conquer the world in year one, and which has enough realism and achievability within it that you can actually see what you're achieving. I think I was lucky. I set up with somebody whose skill set was a real complement to mine, and I would advise people to do that if possible, so that you have a partner to bounce things off. If that's not a possibility, then I would definitely advise people to make connections with individuals whom they can trust, who can help guide and influence them, or at the very least act as a credible sounding board as you travel along and make decisions.
That's a really interesting point there, because I know, Andy, you shared with me that you have a non-exec director, and you have a business coach. And you did that and you had something like 18 years recruitment experience, but you still acknowledge at some level you didn't know it all. So I'm just curious, what was your thinking behind that to get a non-exec and a business coach? What was your thinking there? Well, of those 17 years, I had always worked in big enough businesses such that I had used to having some great people and great resources around me in those businesses. I also knew quite quickly, on setting up, how lonely it can be when all the decisions are down to you, and I'd never truly been in that position before, because I'd had so many people around me. I'd always had a boss. I'd often had a coach, and I'd definitely had lots of good influences. So I guess, at the risk of sounding overly humble, I do know now more than ever that I don't know everything, and setting up your own business definitely teaches you that very quickly. I think it also teaches you that you can always be surprised, and that it's a continual process of learning and development. So with all of that knowledge and experience, when I saw the opportunity to introduce a non-exec director to the business, particularly somebody who actually has no recruitment experience in their background apart from recruiting for themselves, but whose opinion and experience
I trusted implicitly. It felt like the right thing to do, both logically and in terms of a bit of gut feel. And equally, when it comes to business coaching, the challenge of having an experienced business coach who's prepared to question you, challenge you, take you out of your comfort zone and ask the kind of questions you may or may not ask yourself regularly enough, and help you focus on the core actions, and I mean the really important 20% actions that will really make a difference to your business. That was something that I felt I needed, because even though I, like a lot of people, I suppose, I consider myself someone who challenges myself. I'm not scared to take things on. But I do know, if I'm honest with myself, that I don't always challenge myself in the way that an independent third party is able to do. So, it's been a fabulous experience for me having a non-exec director and a business coach, and it's really helped.
Some real insights there, yeah.
Andy, something you've mentioned quite a few times was some of the mistakes that you've made along the way, sort of on your journey to get into where you are now. Can you, as you look back, what's the sort of the biggest mistake or biggest obstacle you had to overcome in business? And what was it? How did you overcome it?
Well, I think when it comes to, there haven't been any particular really, really tough or dark moments in the last 6 years. It's actually been a very pleasurable 6 years, and I'm grateful for the fact that we haven't had any absolute disasters or crises. There is one exception there. If I think back, we had a few years ago, we had an instance where we had 4 decisions at offer stage that all, for one reason or another, went against us in a 2-week period over Christmas and New Year, and that cost us $120,000 in fees, and over 2 weeks, that was quite a tough blow. We'd done absolutely fine prior to that and after it. So again, it wasn't an absolute crisis, but certainly I've made a few mistakes, and I can't think of any major mistakes during the time the business has been around, but certainly just prior to setting up, I think I continued in a role where I was treading water for too long. I mentioned this briefly earlier, and I ended up quite demotivated. I definitely lacked direction, and as you will know, recruitment is such an energy sapping, all consuming business, that I think it's pretty obvious to you and everyone around you when you're not fully committed or passionate in a particular role. And I was almost in this state of paralysis where at one point where I was in between knowing that I wanted to move away from what I was doing, but not being clear or totally honest with myself in terms of what I wanted to do next. I hadn't got to that realization point. So the biggest learn for me, I think, out of that mistake was that it was really important to be thoughtful over these things and to go away, as I said before, put things down on paper, work it through in your head, write down the reality. But we've done that thinking. It's then just as important to be decisive, to be confident, to back yourself really, and be quite dynamic in making a decision and going for it, because you can sit around, analyze and procrastinate for as long as you like, but at some point you've got to step over the threshold and actually go ahead and do something.
Yeah, that's food for thought, isn't it? Yeah. And that period when you quote your language, you were treading water, so to speak, and perhaps lacked a bit of direction. How long was that for, Andy?
18 months. Yeah, and it's easy to waste that kind of time period.
And do you know what happened to get you out of that, where you kind of got back your mojo, for want of a better word?
Well, I mean, it was a combination of things, actually. I think some of it was just a realization thing. You think about things long enough, suddenly the penny drops. But also speaking to a couple of people, I got into a conversation with the person that I set this business up with, and again that had an influence. So quite a few little things that got me to the point of realizing that I needed to take action and actually do something and make a decision.
Yeah, good for you. Andy, I remember you sharing a story with me, as you were chauffeuring me back home from London. By the way, Andy, why do you wear that hat when you're driving? Is that? I'll pull you there.
Future aspiration.
Yeah. Seriously, but I remember you sharing a story, and you said something about. I don't want to put words in your mouth. About you thought perhaps as a business you may have been bullied or intimidated by bigger firms, but you learned some lessons. Can you share with us some of those examples that you shared with me, Andy?
You're listening to the Renegade Recruiter Unleashed podcast. For show notes, additional resources, and podcast updates, head over to www.therenegaderecruiter.com.
Yeah, by all means. I think, I mean, just a general point on this, I think that's a very, very easy position to get into when you're a small business. And I think it happens all the time. There have been a number of occasions when, in order to prove our capability, clients have asked us, clients that we've obviously not worked with before, have asked us to work at very low rates, just to have the opportunity of working with them and to demonstrate what we're capable of. But we very quickly realised, and we actually did do that a couple of times early on, by the way, but we very quickly realised that was completely the wrong starting point for any relationship of any value, business or otherwise. I think all businesses offer some flexibility dependent on the potential return, and we're no different in that respect. I want us to be flexible to some degree, because I think that's partly how you build relationships. But you have to draw the line somewhere to ensure that you don't compromise what you stand for, and so that long term. Everyone talks about long term planning, but long term planning and long term goals are just an accumulation of short term actions and short term standards. And so for us to achieve what we want to long term and be the business that we want to, you have to draw that line and have standards. And I'm not. That sounds like a really theoretical point. I don't want it to, because I know absolutely how hard that is to do. And any small business owner will just how difficult those kind of can be. Of you is that you can spend all day chasing cheaper business where your expertise is not truly valued. It's much better to spend quality time, and in fact less time, chasing better business. And so that's been an experience throughout the last 6 years. But I think one of the examples that you referred to, Terry, was involved clients. We've had a number of instances where we've had fee disputes. They're quite a regular thing in our sector. Where we've had a dispute over the actual value of a fee, or where we found a lost fee, i.e. a client has taken somebody on whom we introduced. And we found that some particularly much bigger firms do not expect small suppliers to stand up to them. But we've actually consistently done this from a very early stage. We made a decision very early on that if we had a strong argument and the facts were very clear, we would stand our ground and make our case. And now at times that approach has created quite a tense relationship, as you would expect, with certain clients. But I can honestly say that we have either walked away from such disputes happy, but knowing that some clients we will not want to work with again because they don't necessarily fit our definition of a good client or exhibit the behaviours that we expect. So we've walked away happy in that knowledge, or in some cases, in fact, our strong approach to such disputes and standing our ground has actually helped us to strengthen the relationship, and we've gone on to not only work with the client again, but to work in a much more transparent, much better way, and it's taken that relationship to a different level. So surprisingly, some very good can often come out of what feels like quite a tense time.
Yeah. I know Drew's got a quote, you will be treated how you allow yourself to be treated. Is that correct, Drew? Have I quoted you correctly there?
Yeah, I've said similar things to that. I can't remember exactly how I phrased it, but yeah, I think in every area of life, I mean, people can treat you a certain way once, but I mean, if they continue to do it, it's because you've allowed them to, effectively.
Yeah. Yeah, and I, again, without giving the name of any of these, because some of these companies that you've stood up for have been multi-million-pound international global organisations.
Yeah, multi-billion. And,
multi-billion.
And the fact is that that these businesses, some of them have to have certain rules in place that allow them to deal with people who are in dispute, so to speak. But it's only if you're prepared to go beyond the first or second stage and actually stand up for yourself. And of course, this is the footnote here is providing you have a very good reason. But I think that reasoned argument is something that most sensible, intelligent business people will always understand, and most people will put emotion to one side if the facts are clear. But it comes back down to do it, and sometimes not having too much fear of loss.
Yeah.
And
sorry, Drew, Karen.
Sorry, Andy. Some thing you've mentioned there a couple of times is that you have been prepared to walk away from business and not work with particular clients again. Is that something that you've always felt from the beginning, or was there sort of I guess, did you have to sort of come to the realization that that's something you'll have to do? Because I mean, I know a lot of the clients that we work with, and even in our own business in the beginning, walking away from business or turning our clients away seems like such a big thing. I mean, how do you deal with it on a personal level?
Well, I don't think it's easy, and I don't think it's been easy. So I'm not by any means trying to suggest that we've had it's been very straightforward for us over the last 6 years. I think it comes from two things. It comes from, as I've probably said before, it comes from having a set of standards and drawing a line. But that's a really easy thing to say, but harder to do. What it really comes from is confidence levels. And the truth with us is that we probably did compromise those standards to some degree in the first 12, 18 months of our existence. And that was purely because, you do start off with nothing when you set up a business. And it is, that is when the something is better than nothing mentality is a little bit easier to creep in to your business plan. And over time, I think what we've done is we've had experiences of spending quite a lot of time doing a lot of work for very little return. So that helps to drive your decision making when you realize how inefficient your efforts actually are. But the other thing is that as we grew as a business, the confidence level comes flying through as well. So part of it is about time, growth, confidence, and having more of a solid platform behind you. And some of it is about going through the experience and actually seeing for yourself. Sometimes seeing things that are blindingly obvious, but until you actually experience them and waste your time for a very little return, you don't learn that lesson. Yeah,
and that's a really good point there, Andy. Some real lessons here. So I get from that again, I don't know for sure, please correct me if I'm wrong on this, that initially you did a lot of contingency work, did a lot of work for clients where you weren't getting paid up front, and you do less of that now and most of your work is retained?
That's right. Yeah, that's been a constant trend through the business from day one. A lot more of our work now is retained than not, and that's helped us to have better relationships, more committed client relationships.
And Andy, what would you say to anybody listening to this now who works on contingency, who would argue with you, yeah, but my clients don't pay retainers? What would your response be to that?
Well, my experience is that I've come across very few businesses who don't pay retainers. There's nearly always a reason why they don't pay retainers, and that tends to be because they don't see the value in it, and they don't necessarily believe the argument. There are very few companies, particularly medium to large businesses, who have never paid a retainer. They may have had a bad experience in doing but very few who just say we absolutely will not and never have paid retainers. So I mean, I don't buy that argument. That doesn't mean it's easy to achieve, because of course it's based on trust, often familiarity, belief. But it's more about putting the argument forward than pretending that they just don't do it. That is the I think the easiest objection, if you like, or the easiest way to get rid of a recruiter is who's looking to do retained business. It's just by denying that you've ever worked in that manner.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. And just from a personal experience, when recruiters tell me that and say, well, my clients don't pay, or my sector or my niche don't pay retainers, the question I always ask is, well, how often do you ask? And they say, well, I don't ask because we're not going to get it. And my response is, here's what I know is if you don't ask, you never will get it. You know,
that's true. And what I would also say is that the more niche, the more likely
absolutely
that they'll work on a retainer.
Yeah. Absolutely right. That's brilliant. Thanks for that. And again, I know off air, so to speak, you were just sharing me with and we're not going to give the name of the business away, but a client that you're in dispute with, and this was over a candidate they took of yours some time ago. That's now been resolved, and you're expecting a cheque of about £20,000 very shortly.
That's right. Yes. And that was I guess a reasonably good example of a group who, of course, have their own rules in place in terms of how to deal with disputes. But in that instance, we could have easily given up at the first, second, or third hurdle. But in fact, because we were persistent, and of course because ultimately we had a very strong argument and very clear facts sitting behind us, we were not prepared to give up on that, and we got the right result at the end. Again, without really destroying any relationships, because the facts were looked at, the facts were understood, and the right conclusions were drawn.
Great lesson there for anybody in that situation. I suppose the lesson there is to stand your ground and don't be bullied, intimidated, just because they're a multi-billion or million firm. Just don't be intimidated by them and to stand your ground. Thanks for sharing that, Andy. That's sadly, Drew and we talk to recruiters every day of the week and they tell us stories of them being literally bullied by bigger firms, and we're constantly saying stand your ground and stand up to them. So well done you, Andy. Fantastic. And I hope that's an inspiration to people as you listen to that. I hope that inspires you, and what you can do there.
Andy,
so Andy, sorry, Drew, go on.
I was going to say, Andy, one thing that sort of, I know, Terry, we sort of discussed it a while ago. One thing that I guess impressed me about you when we first met you was, I guess, your, can we call it an obsession with the profitability of your business. And what I mean by that is, arguably all businesses should be looking at profits, but you'll meet so many recruitment and search firm owners who they're more fixated on revenue, and then when it's not until you look at their business in more detail, you actually look at the number of consultants they have, their overheads, and you realise they're not actually that profitable, if at all. Where you were almost professional in that way, that you were focused on profits a lot more than you were on revenue. For anyone listening to this, can you sort of give some tips or I guess what standards do you have in place to ensure that you are always profitable?
Well, I mean, obviously there are quite a lot of facets to this. Of course, revenue drives everything anyhow, so we can't ignore revenue. But to become obsessed with revenue alone is not the answer. If you look after the top line, everything theoretically should look after itself, as long as you don't want to buy yourself a yacht every year. But I think. Beyond driving sales and developing great valuable client relationships, it's about cutting your cloth accordingly. So when setting up, this goes back to the planning stage. It's so important to write down the reality of what you are prepared to do in year 1, year 2, and year 3. Plan and write down how you want things to look, but probably plan how things might look if they don't go as well as planned, and cut your cloth accordingly. And I certainly did that from a personal point of view, and with the business and the way that we set up the things that we spent or didn't spend money on in the early days, so that we had a business which felt genuinely, not just by the fees that we might be putting up on the board every month. Felt as though it was moving forward, and this is a view, I think, which has been developed and shaped over the 17 years that I worked for other companies before my own. But my view has always been that it's the bottom line that matters, and unless you're delivering at that level, it's very easy to get carried away. Maybe a bit of an ego trip. Looking at revenue, where the value of your business and the strength of it really isn't there. If you look at a set of management accounts, so I think that how you go about doing that is you drive the top line as much as possible, but you make sure that you're sensible with costs from day one. And particularly as the owner of a business, I think you need to be prepared to say, look, this is how. This is what I expect in return from the business in the first year or two, and be sensible with that as well.
And it's interesting.
The other thing I've probably missed there, Terry, is that the philosophy that we have as well is that when it comes to growing the business, and we're in a better position now than we've ever been to do that. The approach to growing the business and therefore adding cost to the business has always been and will always be that we add when we're all profitable effectively, and that's the best point at which to add. If you go out and recruit a sales team of 5 or 6, then you are leaving a gap between that cost and the revenue return, and you're also adding quite a lot of risk to the business in terms of that revenue coming in the timescales you need it to. So we would rather grow slower, but in a more confident and assured manner.
Good for you. And something that you constantly go on about, Andy, and I admire you for, you constantly say it's profitability rather than scale. And it was interesting at the very beginning of this interview that came up again. That's your real focus. And
yes,
which is fantastic. Well, we meet so many recruitment business owners. I'm not going to give your numbers away with these other guys who, quite frankly, will probably have 5 or 6 consultants, but are not in doing the sort of profits that you're doing, Andy, because they've gone for scale rather than profitability, and it makes us cringe. And Drew made that good point there. When you look closely at the numbers, you kind of think, well, you're just making money, or you're probably losing money, and it's a real eye opener. I think it's
and that's an interesting point. Of course, we've talked, and I talked about the sort of business dynamics of all of this, which is all good, but actually what it's driven by, as much as anything, beyond sort of pure business principles, is that if you own a business, you've got to enjoy it. And for me personally, it's harder to enjoy something if you know that the top line is getting away from you, and your cost base, I should say, is getting away from you, and you're not seeing the benefits. So a lot of it comes back to what environment would you want to work in as a business owner, where you can genuinely say that you're enjoying yourself.
Excellent. Yeah, good point. Yeah. Andy, that's been fantastic, absolutely fantastic. Really do appreciate you sharing this with us, and there's so many lessons here. What's really clear is that you have a well-defined goal, and you know where you want to get to. You're really clear about what you stand for as well, and what you don't stand for. And that taking that, not what you said earlier is about not to compromise on what you stand for, and we can all learn from that, regardless of the business. You can all learn from that. You said something earlier about focusing on the 20%, and for most recruitment and search business owners, it's the 20% that will give them the 80% of their results. And I think critically, and Drew brought this up again about you focus on profitability rather than scale. Again, we can all learn from that. Andy, thank you so much for sharing that with us. It's been absolutely fantastic. For people listening to us, are you okay for people to connect with you on LinkedIn, Andy?
Oh, by all means, yeah.
Yeah, excellent. So it's Andy Naylor, isn't it? Naylor, yeah.
Nay, that's it.
Yeah, fantastic. Please, connect with Andy on LinkedIn. But that's absolutely fantastic. Drew, thank you so much again for joining us on the interview. That's really appreciated, Drew. Thank you so much indeed.
It's okay.
So this is Terry Edwards. If you enjoyed this, tell all your friends about it. If you didn't enjoy it, well, keep it to yourself. But seriously, thank you so much for listening. This is Terry Edwards, Renegade Recruiter. Take care, take action, and be relentless.